Continuing in Acts at the end of chapter 20, Paul has just said his goodbyes to the elders of the Ephesian church there at Miletus. As we begin chapter 21, we see him traveling from there and ultimately toward Jerusalem. Verse 1 reads, "And it came to pass that after we were gotten from them and had launched, we came with a straight course and course, and the day following unto Rhodes, and from thence unto Patara. And finding the ship sailing over to Phoenicia, we went aboard and set forth. Now when we had discovered Cyprus, we left it on the left hand and sailed into Syria, and landed at Tyre, for there the ship was to unlade her burden. And finding disciples, we tarried there 7 days, who said to Paul through the Spirit that he should not go up to Jerusalem. And when we had accomplished these days, we departed and went our way, and they all brought us on our way with wives and children till we were out of the city, and we kneeled down on the shore and prayed. And when we had taken our leave one of another, we took ship, and they returned home again. And when we had finished our course from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, and saluted the brethren, and abode with them 1 day." It seems that because the ship was stopped there to unload the cargo, either they had to wait a time before they would depart toward Jerusalem or find another ship. But clearly they stayed with the disciples there, and the camaraderie, the fellowship that they had was so great that, of course, they accompanied them even to the point of them leaving once again. Verse 7 reads, "And when we had finished our course from Tyre, we came to Ptolemais, and saluted the brethren, and abode with them 1 day. On the next day, we that were of Paul's company departed and came to Caesarea, and we entered into the house of Philip the evangelist, which was one of the 7, and abode with him. And the same had 4 daughters, virgins, which did prophesy." Now, of course, the nature of when they were permitted to prophesy is not given from the text. We know Philip from Acts chapter 7. Not much really being said here. Some argue that they were not dedicated virgins to the Lord as far as prophesying, perhaps in the public square or the company of other women. The text just doesn't really give us any details. Verse 10, "And we tarried there many days. There came down from Judea a certain prophet named Agabus. And when he was come unto us, he took Paul's girdle and bound his own hands and feet, and said, Thus saith the Holy Ghost, So shall the Jews at Jerusalem bind the man that owneth this girdle, and shall deliver him into the hands of the Gentiles. And when we heard these things, both we and they of that place besought him not to go up to Jerusalem. Then Paul answered, What mean ye to weep and break mine heart? For I am ready not to be bound only, but also to die at Jerusalem for the name of the Lord Jesus." This is a bit of a difficult passage. We know from previous chapters that Paul was well aware of what awaited him. It almost seemed as if the Spirit was telling Paul that this would happen. Whether it should or shouldn't happen is kind of where people question it. Now, Agabus clearly says, like all the others, that this will happen. And then they ask him not to go to Jerusalem. Now, there's a difference between the prophet and their reaction to it, urging him not to go. The urging him not to go may not have been part of the prophecy. And I think if we take everything in consideration, that becomes a bit more clear. Moving on to verse 14. "And when he would not be persuaded, we ceased, saying, The will of the Lord be done. And after those days we took up our carriage to Jerusalem. There went with us also certain of the disciples of Caesarea, and brought with them one Mnason of Cyprus, an old disciple, with whom we should lodge." What does it mean for him to be an old disciple? Was he up in years? Was he perhaps one of the had he been a disciple for such a long time, like going back to the days of John the Baptist? The text isn't clear. Verse 17, "And when we were come to Jerusalem, the brethren received us gladly." Excuse me. "Paul went in with us unto James, and all the elders were present." So he's meeting with James and the elders of Jerusalem. And when he had saluted them, he declared particularly what things God had wrought among the Gentiles by his ministry. And when they heard it, they glorified the Lord and said unto him, Thou seest, brother, how many thousands of Jews there are which believe, and they are all zealous of the law. And they are informed of thee that thou teachest all the Jews which are among the Gentiles to forsake Moses, saying that they ought not to circumcise their children, neither to walk after the customs. What is it therefore? The multitude must come together, for they will hear that thou art come. Do therefore this that we say unto thee. We have 4 men which have a vow on them. Them take and purify thyself with them, and be at charges with them, that they may shave their heads, and all may know that those things whereof they were informed concerning thee are nothing, but that thou thyself also walkest orderly and keepest the law. There's 2 ways to, there's actually multiple ways of understanding this passage. It seems that because of the Jewish Christians, especially those who would be in town for the feast at this time, there's a rumor that Paul was telling them to neglect the law of Moses, not circumcise their children. This is not the case. Now, whether Paul had a full understanding, like you read some of his epistles at this time or not, is often debated. It seems that to a lot of people that he is trying to keep the peace between Jew and Gentile by doing this because he himself is Jewish and not against the traditions as far as Jewish Christians are concerned. Because that's really the key, is we don't need to force Gentiles to be circumcised to keep the law of Moses. That has been his battle ever, since Acts chapter 15. But because of that, it has caused rumors and things to spread. There's no clear indication about what sort of vow they were under or how they were relieved of it. Once again, it seems to sound similar to a Nazirite vow, but it's not definite. And how Paul could participate in that, whether he was right or wrong in participating in it, or right and wrong in giving in to the pressure, is again hotly debated. So moving forward in verse 25, as touching the Gentiles which believe, we have written and concluded that they observe no such thing, save only that they keep themselves from things offered to idols, and from blood, and from strangled, and from fornication. Then Paul took them in, and the next day, purifying himself with them, entered into the temple to signify the accomplishment of the days of purification, until that an offering should be offered for every one of them, which raises a lot of questions about the offering being made. But moving along, verse 27, when the 7 days were almost ended, the Jews which were of Asia, when they saw him in the temple, stirred up all the people and laid hands on him, crying out, Men of Israel, help, this is the man that teacheth all men everywhere against the people and the law and this place, and further brought Greeks also into the temple, and hath polluted this holy place. For they had seen before with him in the city Trophimus, an Ephesian, whom they supposed that Paul had brought into the temple. So even though they saw Paul traveling with a Gentile, they assumed wrongly that he was brought into the temple. And again, assumed wrongly that he was teaching against Jewish people, against the law, and against the temple in some regard, that he was not teaching in that manner. Verse 30, and all the city was moved, and the people ran together, and they took Paul and drew him out of the temple, and forthwith the doors were shut. And as they went about to kill him, tidings came unto the chief captain of the band that all Jerusalem was in an uproar. Now, some people have problems with what Agabus says in verse 11. They say the Jews at Jerusalem will bind him and deliver him to the hands of the Gentiles. They clearly took him, and they were going to kill him, and then they deliver him up to the Roman soldiers. I don't know exactly what the problem is. It seems to be what the narrative is saying, unless the objection is that he was literally bound. But clearly he was taken. He was going to be executed until the authorities or the soldiers were called. And there was, from what I've read, according to sources, a series of steps that led to a particular garrison that was stationed. Certain soldiers for instances such as this, so they would have had quick access if there was an uproar. Verse 32, who immediately took soldiers and centurions and ran down unto them, and when they saw the chief captains and soldiers, they left beating of Paul. Then the chief captain came near and took him and commanded him to be bound with 2 chains, and demanded who he was and what he had done. And some cried one thing, some another among the multitude, and when he could not know the certainty for the tumult, he commanded him to be carried into the castle. And when he came upon the stairs, so it was that he was borne of the soldiers for the violence of the people. For the multitude of the people followed after, crying, away with him. And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, may I speak unto thee? Who said, canst thou speak Greek? Art thou not that Egyptian which before these days madest an uproar, and leddest unto the wilderness 4,000 men that were murderers? This man's rounded number estimation doesn't necessarily match history and Josephus, but again, who estimated, who rounded the number off, and who exaggerated is anyone's guess. Verse 39, but Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew of Tarsus, a city in Cilicia, a citizen of no mean city, and I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people. And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue, saying. So then this begins the speech he has in chapter 22 about his life, his Judaism, his conversion, and ultimately Jesus Christ. So because Paul was born in Cilicia, that particular city, he was a Roman citizen. He was not an Egyptian and that sort of thing. But he spoke to the people in Hebrew, and because he spoke in Hebrew, they definitely stopped and gave attention. So this discourse that happens next in chapter 22 is going to be communicated in Hebrew up until they basically interrupt him. So that's roughly chapter 21. Chapter 22, Paul gives his defense, and we enter into this particular section where Paul's in chains and bound throughout the rest of the book of Acts. So we'll continue on with chapter 22, Lord willing. Thank you for your time and attention.